At New Cumberland Church of Nazarene, we value people. Folks, that's really our calling card. Now, the first time you come, we say you're a guest. But the second time you come, you're family. It really and honestly resonates though, with who we are and how we are as a church. There's a picture of my family that I wanted to show you today. It's from the late 80s. My grandparents, my dad's parents, retired, and their 6 kids and their families threw this retirement party for them, and we took a family photo. And this picture, it's got some diversity limits. I mean, there's one Native American, and the rest of us are all white. That's how a lot of families tend to go. So that's not ideal. My grandparents are 65, and then their oldest kids are in their late 40s. So there's everybody. There's a kid in a diaper, and everybody in between. But on the older end of the spectrum, there's just those two. So it lacks some diversity there. But this picture, it spans so many other things, and I see, actually out of this, there's 30 people in the picture. And of those 30 people, there are 5 lead pastors. That's a high rate. Obviously, I was one of them, but I'm I think maybe 8. So I don't have a sweater vest yet. There are at least 3 other staff pastors of that 30, and I can't guess honestly how many ministry leaders there are in that picture. Probably more than half of the people in this family photo have been on church boards because they just are a family. We are a family that serves. And I see that picture and I think about the potential of a church. Isn't the church supposed to be all ages? When you're reading scripture about the work of the church, doesn't it seem like people were getting their hands dirty? They were involved. Doesn't it seem like they were a collection of workers and ministers? That's what I read about, and that's what I envision. And I should tell you that the people in this picture, they're not just bloodlines of a certain type of family. The people that married into that picture they don't come from similar families. And I only tell you that to say that this thought I've got, this image I've got, it doesn't disqualify anyone. Okay? You don't need to be one of the blonde-headed kids in this picture to fit in this picture or to fit in this church. Okay? And so as I thought about this picture, my attention was drawn to this tree in the background. We're around this big tree that, again, you can't see because the screens are out. And this actually was at my house, and I don't remember why exactly, but this tree was in my front yard, and it's huge. And I thought the tree is a beautiful image or metaphor or analogy for the church as well. It's rooted and grounded in a firm foundation. It's thick and dependable. It's growing higher and higher. It's branching out to become something beautiful. It's providing shade and shelter for a number of living things all around it. And we all understand the branches of a tree, they reach in different directions, but they all come from one trunk, and they all share one source of strength. The church needs to do more than just Sunday mornings, straight up and down. It needs to minister to more than one age group or demographic. A tree is part of the ecosystem that it's in. It needs water from rain in the soil. It needs sunlight. It needs, it needs to house birds and squirrels. It needs to be pollinated by bees. And a church needs to both serve and be served by its community. It needs to be connected. In fact, trees are supposed to plant and make new trees. It's a necessary part of the life cycle of trees, and it's an important part of the life of a church. Now, I'm leading towards a presentation or proposal this morning. Planning a church is not it. I just want, if you're getting nervous all of a sudden, I don't believe our church is ready for that, but we do need to be in the process toward that. I believe that. It's part of our job. In fact, as I think about the church as a tree metaphor, a tree isn't enough, is it? Even a big, beautiful tree like in that picture, even a redwood tree isn't enough. We need a forest, a redwood forest. And it doesn't have to be redwood, but they're big and fun. Do you know that certain types of forests are actually really just one living organism? The roots connect in such a way that they're one. And there's this one colony, it's called a clonal colony. It's in Utah. It's called Pando. And it's actually, it's essentially one quaking aspen tree that has cloned itself over and over and reached out. It's actually considered the world's largest living organism. That is the church. A healthy giant feeding into and off of its surroundings, replicating itself so it can reach and serve farther and farther. When I think about our church, and I think about what has happened in the nearly 5 years I've been here as the pastor, but more importantly, what I believe is supposed to happen in the future, I think about 10 or 20 years from now, I see a redwood forest from this church. I think we need to be spreading out and cloning ourselves in other churches. We need to be raising up leaders and pastors who can go and minister and branch out. When I look into the future of this church, I see that forest. And I believe that the time I've spent here has been preparing the soil for some great planting and some great growth. I think it is time for our church to bloom and blossom in such a way that our trunk grows stronger and our branches reach farther. It's time for us to become that beautiful tree. But there are some branches that have been neglected. Some have just aged or been pruned or broken off in a storm. And I think it's time for us to take some specific steps to get those branches growing strong. It's a little bit indelicate to say, but this church planted a church just a few years before I came, but not in a healthy way. Not in the way that we would have wanted. I've talked to a lot of you. I've heard your stories about how you raised up kids in Sunday school and special events, and they became teens and then young adults, and then they were leaders, and then they broke off from here and planted a church. And we've mourned that difficult time. We've come through it. And now I believe for us to branch out, we need to dig in to kids once again. Joyce Andrews, who leads our children's ministry, she is a wonderful asset to our church. She has given her heart to us through our kids and through kids in our community who she has literally gone and found and invited and then driven here and taught and loved week after week. And I believe it is time for us to join with Joyce in this mission to fill our branches through young people. In the last couple of weeks, I say we, but really it was Sheila in the office, has contacted every church in Hancock County. There are 52 of them. And there's not a single paid children's pastor here, which means that there is likely no one in our county who is trained and educated specifically to minister to children and families. There are families in our area who are in need of ministry that is not currently offered to them. As I've thought about the folks that have walked through our doors in the last 5 years, there are 3 single adults that come to mind. But the rest, dozens of people, more people than are in this room, have visited with families that had specific needs and expectations for ministries to their kids. So here is the proposal. It's an experiment to see what could happen. We're proposing a 2-year experiment. We want to hire a pastor of children and families, a half-time or part-time position, somebody that is called and passionate and trained for that special ministry. And then we want to support that person with a ministry budget, support them in prayer, support them with volunteers. See, generally speaking, in the children's ministry, most of the volunteers are the parents of the children, and that will be the goal and the plan. But that won't work in the beginning of our experiment because their parents aren't necessarily here. So we will need to step up and serve to help this ministry reach its potential. This staff person will work to make connections at New Manchester Elementary School. They will work to create a digital presence to reach and serve kids and families. They will coordinate at least 2 children's events each year and at least 2 other parents' events each year. They'll oversee kids' Sunday school teachers and nursery workers. They will recruit and train and empower our volunteers. The experiment is to see what could happen, what someone with a calling and gifting from God could do with the right support in our local church and in our community. So we're putting a 2-year timeline on it for 2 reasons. One is so that the candidate will have a confidence that they can come here and they won't feel pressure for these immediate results. They can truly build something, but also so that if the experiment isn't successful, we have an out. We haven't committed to just taxing ourselves endlessly in this failing endeavor. So a clear-cut timeline with drawn up and understood objectives will give us the best chance at success. And if we're correct, and this is what God wants for us, we hope to have a pastor here before school starts in the fall. That's what we're thinking right now. So in order to pay this person, the board has committed to pay 1 year out of our savings. But for the second year, we're asking you. There's a survey that you'll be getting today if you're in the house this morning, or it's going to be online. There's a digital version that you'll be able to access, or as I've been warned will happen when you lose this one. You can do that online. The survey is going to ask a few questions, and I want to share that with you. Then it's going to ask you to make a pledge to give above and beyond your normal tithes and offerings. And the time limit helps with this as well, because we're not asking you to start giving more forever. We're asking you to give more for this time. If it's a weekly gift or monthly or just a lump sum, but it's not forever. When we collect the surveys, we're going to add up the pledges to see if we can afford to do this experiment. And I really believe that this experiment will go a long way to fill the branches of our tree. It will enable our redwood to grow strong and in time even grow into a forest. So the surveys, this is one of them. You're going to get one today. It's got 5 questions. The first is, have you prayed about the proposal? The board and I have been in prayer for this for about 2 months. We are confidently presenting it today, okay? But we want you to join us in prayer before you actually give your feedback. Question number 2 asks if you believe that we should hire a children's pastor. What is the result of your prayer been? Number 3, will you support this ministry in prayer? Number 4, will you help with this ministry in volunteering? And that could be, once a month you do something, or just, at this one event, or you fold pieces of paper at some point. But will you physically volunteer somehow? Can we count on you to help? And the final question is that what financial pledge will you make over the next 2 years to support this ministry? Now, we're not going to receive these back until April 25th. That's 4 weeks from today. Between then and now are going to be 2 events. One is on April 11th. We're going to have a question and answer time after our morning service for anything that you want to have discussed openly, any questions you want to ask. We're going to answer them as best we can. That's April 11th. And then the other event is a pray through the night. We're going to make it a little earlier so it's more accessible to folks. I believe it's going to start at 7 p.m. on April 23rd. We're going to spend a 3-hour block here in guided prayer and to seek the Lord's will on this. And then we'll receive these on the 25th. See how God has led us. I do want to ask you not to try to find the children's pastor right now. That's putting the cart before the horse. We're not there. We're seeking the Lord to see if this is something we should do. And the biggest problem, I would hate for some candidate to hear about this and get excited and then find out there's actually not even an opportunity. And so let's just wait. We will use all kinds of different channels to find candidates, but that's only after we hear from the Lord through this survey. And if we're led to proceed, I absolutely will welcome your input and suggestions about candidates, but not yet, okay? So for the next 4 weeks, we need you to make this a priority in your prayers. It will also need to be a consideration for your budget. Our church has faithful givers, and we support what we do here very well. But we can't do this experiment with our normal tithes and offerings. This is another level of giving that is needed. So if this is what we need to do, it will require new gifts from most of us. That is the proposal.